Hello and welcome to another painting tutorial with Moog's Little Figures, where a bearded idiot does unspeakable things to innocent plastic. In today's episode, what I'm going to be doing is painting a sort of grimdark Space Marines. So I'm doing the Blood Ravens here, but this technique will work with pretty much any chapter. Change the colours, obviously. And it's really simple. What I'm trying to do with these tutorials is basically lift the veil on what looks like fairly complicated painting styles, but really isn't. Anyone can do it, even me, as I'm about to demonstrate. So first things first, what you need to do is get a nice matte black undercoat on your miniature, and then rather than going in the usual zenithal as I would normally do, we're going to go straight in with a bit of a shake. Rhinox Hide. Now, it sounds a bit weird for a red miniature to go in with a brown, but this is a nice warm reddish brown. Now, we don't need to be too neat with this. So let's get the wet palette on the go. Let's get a bit of that. Now onto the wet palette. Blop. Okay. And because we always do this with Games Workshop paints, because they run a bit thick, a little bit of wet stuff. Let's call it water. On the top of the palette there. You don't need to dilute it too much because you're looking for quite a thick coat on the miniature itself. So just a tiny little bit of water. And there's going to be no noticeable difference initially. Now, you don't need to be too neat with this at all, because that's the essence of the technique. And you're just going over the raised areas, getting everything a once over with the Rhinox Hide, just to give it a bit of warmth. We're not being too fussy. If we can keep it out of the furrows and just leave the deeper black beneath, that's great, but we're not too worried at this stage, or indeed at any stage in this particular technique. It is not requiring any level of finesse, which is good, because I don't do finesse. So you get the idea. Just basic over the top, not being too fussy. And there we have him finished with a nice deep chocolate brown colour over all the raised areas, leaving the black of the undercoat in the recesses. The next stage is going to involve, give this another shake, some corn red. Now obviously if you're doing ultramarines or something, don't use corn red for this bit. You use I don't even know, whatever they suggest for using on ultramarines, or your chapter of choice. Other chapters are available. So let's get a bit of our red, corn red, onto the wet palette. We need our nastiest brush for this, because we're not going to be detail painting at all. This is going to be mostly stippling. So get a load of that onto your wet palette, and then close up your paint. Lose more paint that way, and get most of the paint off your paintbrush. Now this is just a beat up dry brush. Use your oldest, nastiest brush, because this technique is going to wreck it. And all you're doing is stippling that corn red over the raised areas lightly, so it gives a sort of a chipped, worn appearance. You can do this with a little bit of sponge, but I find that kind of works better on vehicles than infantry. Infantry need a little bit more control, but again, there's no real finesse to this technique. Now, a lot of tutorial videos about weathering techniques and things will try and get you to think in terms of where the damage would occur. That's right, absolutely correct. However, at this stage we really don't care. We're just laying down a base colour that looks chipped and worn. But the game changer in terms of weathering is indeed thinking about how the damage would occur and where the damage would occur, and thinking about the story of the miniature that you're painting. So you should be able to start to see what's happening there. You're getting a sort of a mottled, chipped effect on the armour plates. You might need a few coats, and that's fine. Because this is actually the mid-tone of the miniature, the corn red. So if you were painting a regular blood raven miniature, you'd still start off with the Rhinox to give a deep base, but you'd be going in neatly with this corn red rather than stippling on like this. In places you can actually use your dry brush like a dry brush and just scrape the paint on at the edge. Get right in there into the recesses with it. You're still dabbing straight down, so you're not looking for any real sort of solid coverage. You're just looking for this mottled, chipped. Servitors haven't had a chance to buff the armour because the blood ravens are, they're not sort of well-to-do like the Black Templars of this world. They don't have servitors following them around polishing their swords in the middle of combat. We'll leave that to the poster boys. And let's face it, any servitors the blood ravens have probably aren't theirs, or weren't theirs originally. So there we go, just stippling it on. Until you got something like that, which is super dark, super grim. And now we're going to take it up a stage. Now I'm not sure what the Games Workshop equivalent of this paint is, but I'm sure there is one. Time was it would have been Go Faster Red or something similar. Whoa, okay, that paint was enthusiastic. So whatever the bright sort of, I don't know, Go Faster Red, Wazdaka, whatever, I don't know what the modern paint range would be, but a nice, bright, highly chromatic red. This is AP's pure red, so it's as red could be. Now there's a little bit, as much finesse as actually takes part, is actually involved in this process. It comes in here, because this is where you start thinking about highlights. But we're still stippling at the side closest to the light, sort of almost but not edge highlighting. So anywhere that would catch the light from the direction of the light gets an extra hit of the brighter red. And this is where your dry brushing can take over. Mixing in there, but you're still getting the stippling in there. So we're not completely dry brushing. Still trying to get that worn finish on the miniature. And you actually build up a little bit of texture. I don't know whether the camera will show it properly. No. But on the Mark 1 eyeball you can clearly see there's actually a little bit of texture to this as well, which is really cool. Okay, just on the edge of that. Yeah. So you can hopefully see what I'm doing. On the super raised areas, you're just building up layers of colour and bringing some contrast into it, because one of the schools of thought on Grimdark is really grimy and damaged and worn, and yeah, that's true. It can be a bit of that, but another part of it is creating the illusion of really deep shadows and dark, oppressive ambience around the miniature, putting the miniature in a setting that is grim and dark rather than making the miniature itself grim and dark, if that makes any kind of sense. So with this we're sort of building up the raised areas to a high contrast or higher contrast, and just leaving those really dark, moody, deep shadows. Now you notice I'm not being particularly careful about this. I'm just creating a very rough, a very rough finish. But if you put this at arm's length or put it down on a table, the contrast that you've created between light and shadow will really pop when it's on the table. And if you really want to set things off, you can put down your stippling brush for a bit, pick up a regular brush and just do some really sparing edge highlighting, almost spot highlighting with your pure red. So just at the very edges, at the brightest points. Okay, so I've been over it and I haven't really missed anything with the red, but what I have done is, because this is Phobos armor, they've got this kind of ribbed undersuit, so, and that's another level of contrast you can introduce, you see. So what I've done there is I've just gone in with some Corvus black, which is not black, it's an off black, it's a very dark grey, which means it's really good as a mid-tone for black. If you're ever going to paint black, don't start with black, just don't. For the shoulders, because the blood ravens are characteristic in their dark red and a sort of bony colour, shoulder pads usually. So we're going to go in with a bit of Wraithbone. I'm straight on top of the Rhinox Hide, not doing anything funny there. So we get a bit of that out onto the wet palette. And exactly the same technique. We're just going to be stippling that on, not worrying about the edges or anything like that. Just try not to get it on any of the red that you've just painted, but we're not worried about the rim on the shoulder pad or anything. And we're just stippling away, and it's going to look rough because it's supposed to look rough. Now you'll notice as I'm doing this that there are large areas that I'm not actually hitting at all on the bits that I'm painting, and I'm just sort of leaving them very dark Again, that's to create that light dark contrast. Because from arm's length it will look fine. I mean, it looks okay fairly close up, to be honest, but you know, it is nowhere near Golden Demon, and that's what I'm all about, producing tutorials for the rest of us. Can't all be Duncan Rhodes, but there's no reason we can't all knock out reasonable looking miniatures for tabletop. And again, try and think where the light's going to hit the most, and try and give those areas an extra going over with the stipple. So once you've got your eye on this technique, you can knock out miniatures looking really quite good at a fair rate of knots. See, I've gone onto the red there, not to worry. Let's go straight over that. No one need know. It's not like anyone's keeping a record of, oh hang on, I'm videoing it. Oops. They're gonna know. That's that. And I think what I'm gonna do, because I'll be doing this, doing the belt pouches and things in a sort of a leather. So I'm just going to give them actual dry brush just to pick out the edges and to give them a bit of a light base, because I'll probably use a contrast on them. You see, but for the fact he hasn't got a head, with a bit more dry brushing, you could almost just throw that straight onto a table and it'll look okay. So it really is a very simple technique. I'm just going to go over this miniature again, make sure I've not missed anything, and we'll come in for finishing touches in a bit. Okay, so I've been over the miniature, and I've just been over with a little bit of the cordon red there, where I've just a little bit diluted corn red, where I've gone over with the wraith bone a bit onto the red armour and just neatened up a little bit. But again, it's a very rough technique, you don't need to neaten it up too much. Now this is a pretty Blood Raven specific technique, because we're going to turn the wraith bone on the shoulders and the backpack there into a more sort of vaguely sepia type colour there, and for that we're going to use Green Stuff World Intensity Ink Sepia Vetus. Now you can use, I think it's called Seraphim Sepia from Games Workshop, works nearly as well. I find the Green Stuff World stuff has a lot more pigment density, so you get a lot more bang from your buck for the inks, so I tend to go with that. But it's essentially the same colour, slight tonal variance, but not enough to cause difficulty between friends. You don't need a lot of this at all. This technique is very light on washes. In fact, I haven't used a wash until now. I'm just getting a little bit of water, dilute that a bit. And you see, look, that's lovely rich colour there. Deep sepia, and that just goes straight on to the shoulder pad. Looks a bit dark, don't panic. You're going to use a very special tool in a moment which will sort that out. Just let that run into the recesses. You know what the deal with washes, but this is more of a glaze, so you're tinting things. And this is where that high contrast between light and shadow that you've been creating whilst you've been painting comes into its own. Because when you tint it, all the highlighting and shading is done for you. There we go. Lovely. Right. And there's the high-tech solution to bring that highlight back up. A quick wipe with your finger over the very highest, very raised areas, and you get that touch of highlight in there. It's not quite dark enough, so we'll go back in again with a little bit more of the sepia around the edges, again with the fingers, dab dab dab, and there we go. Just need to go around the rim of that shoulder pad in Corvus Black, and you're ready to stick a decal on there, which Games Workshop don't do anymore, but there are plenty available on eBay. Now where were we with this? Oh yes, right, we're going on to the pouches and scabbards and things, and holsters and things, which I'm going to use snakebite leather for no other reason, and that's what I've used before. Again, we're going to dilute it a little bit, but not much. So it functions almost like a glaze in itself. You just run that straight over that grey dry brushing we did earlier. And it comes out looking basic but really cool. So there we go. Because we've gone in with that Wraithbone dry brushing, we've got, it's almost pre-highlighted and got a bit of definition and all sorts there. Right, he's starting to get there, isn't he? Just need to pick out the it's going to be details very, very soon. Now I'm going to go on to metallics. For that, I'm going to put the lid back on my wet palette, because you do not put metallics in a wet palette. Just don't, because you get metal flakes in everything, because it spreads through the water and it all goes wrong. Right, my go-to metallic paint for silver, because I have found nothing better, is Vallejo airbrush colours Dura-Aluminium. It's got really, really strong pigment to it. It flows really well. It's a beautiful, beautiful paint. So just tip a little bit out of that on there, because we only really need a little bit. And we're just gonna pick out like the very edges, because again we're creating light and shadow here. The very top edges of the metal bits. You don't even need to paint the whole thing metallic, just the leading edges where it would catch the light, and just let the black and the shadow do the rest. You're tricking the eye. Very edges, letting the eye do the work, and the brain. Creating light and shadow. And again, the top edges of the weapon. At this point we pretty much are dry brushing. I think I pretty much almost called him done. I mean, there's obviously little things like the Oaths of Moment, purity seals and everything like that. But you know, that's the base technique. So, you know, I hope you've enjoyed that. If you find it useful and you like to see more of what I do, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and because it really does help support the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.